What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, January 26, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, over in Washington, D.C., we are continuing to see this fight back and forth regarding the FISA memo, regarding the text messages that were recovered by the Department of Justice, and accusations are flying back and forth. The Democrats are saying that this is just a transparent effort to discredit Robert Mueller's investigation into collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. Well, the investigation is already discredited. They haven't found anything. They've been at this for about a year. They've spent more than $7 million. They've come up with zip. Everything Mueller has done or is threatening to do is unconnected with his original mission, which was to document Trump-Russia collusion. He's gone after Paul Manafort on basically procedural crimes. He's trying to build an obstruction of justice case against Donald Trump over the firing of former FBI Director James Comey. And that's going to be a rather hard one to do, because all Trump has to say, how does the firing of the former FBI Director obstruct an investigation that has found absolutely nothing? But they're still trying to find something out there. So let's get into some of the details here. Basically, the Department of Justice has started to turn over those missing FBI texts. They confirmed yesterday that they had them and have had them since last summer. And now they're basically starting to turn them over to the various congressional investigators who are pouring through them and looking for what was going on. Certainly the anti-Trump bias is obvious. They're trying to find out who else was in on that. And mostly they're looking at this so-called seventh floor team. This is this secret group inside the FBI that apparently met every Wednesday to discuss how to overthrow the presidency of Donald Trump. And that is a very, very serious matter, and there needs to be a special counsel looking at that one. Now, a lot of people are getting kind of frustrated. We know that there's this FISA memo that's over there in the House of Representatives. We know that it contains information that was not based on that earlier memo, the 99-page one that was released, and everybody said, oh, we've got the memo, we've got the memo. No, you've got a memo. You don't have the memo. The memo is still locked up. Supposedly, there's going to be a vote next week on whether to release it or not, and, of course, Donald Trump will not veto that. But a lot of people are very frustrated at how long the process is taking, because justice delayed is justice denied. And they're wondering why so many Republicans, knowing that what is in this FISA memo could very well be the end of this Mueller witch hunt against Donald Trump, they're still talking about blocking it. And they've put themselves in a horrible situation, because Republican voters, they're sick and tired of all this witch hunt. They want this to be over. They want Donald Trump to be free to go on and about and do Donald Trump's agenda, instead of constantly being harassed like this, which is exactly what it's been. The entire first year of his term in office has been nonstop harassment. So they're trying to make excuses for why some Republicans are opposed to releasing the memo. One is that Republicans are very national security conscious, and they don't want to provide precedents for the release of classified information. Well, that's already happened many times, many times. A lot of Republican congressional districts host installations of the military security complex. They're afraid of annoying them. And it just goes on and on. But it's all just making excuses. Because what's really going on here, again, we're seeing exposed this rotted web of corruption that surrounds the Clintons, tangles up the Bushes, has tangled up over the last 30 years, pretty much everybody in Washington, D.C., they're either hooked in with the CIA's gun and drug running, or they were using the Clinton Foundation as a slush fund, or for tax avoidance, or they were dipping their hands into the money flowing around the Uranium One deal. One way or the other, they're all dirty. And that's why they want all of this to go away before the American people really wake up and say, hey, what the blank is going on in the nation's capital? What are these people doing? It's obviously, they're not working for us. They're just out there for themselves, and they're unbelievably corrupt. Just unbelievably corrupt. And that's really what's at stake with all of this. And that's why Americans have got to get on out there. We've got to push for this information to be made public. We have a right to know if, in point of fact, our nation's intelligence agencies were being used by one political party to spy on the candidate of the other political party prior to the election. And that's why this is worse than Watergate. And we need to get it on out there. And we need to demand to be told what's going on. Because this is our country. The government works for us. We're their employers. And it's time to remind them. They work for us, and they are answerable to us. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, again, a lot of people are dropping hints about what's in this FISA memo. And apparently in Wednesday's online edition of the New York Post, Michael Goodwin wrote that, yeah, this is looking like there is a massive scandal that is going to engulf the FBI, worse than COINTELPRO, and another one engulfing the Department of Justice. And basically, we're looking at the expose of the Obama deep state covert operation against Trump. And Goodwin goes on to say that President Trump should just grab the memo and read it during the State of the Union speech, because the president has the right to do that. Now, Donald Trump is prudently staying out of this debate, because if he gets involved, everybody's going to scream, oh, it's proof of his guilt. It's proof of his guilt. He's out there to derail the Mueller investigation. It's more obstruction of justice. So he's letting the process run its course. But he is heading for a clash with the Department of Justice, because apparently that the Intelligence Committee looks like they are going to vote to release the memo as early as next week, and that would be good. And, of course, Assistant Attorney General Stephen Boyd, who is a Trump appointee, wrote in a letter to the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes that releasing the memo publicly would be extraordinarily reckless and endanger national security. Now, Stephen Boyd has no way to know that. He doesn't know what's in the memo. He may be guessing at what's in the memo. He may know what the Department of Justice and the FBI were doing, and he would be understandably concerned if that were in the memo. But he doesn't really know. But apparently a lot of Republicans are getting tired of waiting, and there's even talk they're just going to go ahead and send the memo directly to Trump's office. Apparently Donald Trump has not himself actually seen what is in this memo. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. John in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Happy Friday to you. You know, I was thinking romantically, the FISA memo might have been leveraged when they had the government shutdown, where they told Schumer, because presumably would this not hurt Obama and Obama's Democrats the most, going, ha-ha, you were spying on Trump illegally?
Oh, yeah. That's why the Democrats are in such a panic about this. You know, this is the Democratic version of Watergate.
Well, what I'm thinking here is, the truth is Paul Ryan's long-term agenda, Mitch McConnell's long-term agenda, or wherever their handlers are, the establishment Republicans, they don't want that wall, and they want the DACA. So actually, they're still like never Trumpers. Trump's going to come and Trump's going to go, but 30-year long-term Republican establishment guys, they're still going to be there. And I'm actually thinking they won't release it. because they're in bed with the Democrats and they're all about big government. And even if Trump got $25 billion for the wall, they won't even break ground on the wall. They'll just go spend that $25 billion on something else. You know, humor gives the Republicans their wars. You know, I mean, so the game being played here is I really don't think that there's going to be a big Obama Democrat bashing session and Trump was right, because I don't think the establishment Republicans are aligned with Trump at all. I really don't. I don't think Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell could care less about what Trump wants or Trump's patriotism. I still think they're part of the deep state, and he's his own, you know, he's in his own orbit.
Well, we better find a way to get that FISA memo out there, and we better find a way to get those texts out there. The nation cannot go on with this degree of corruption in our central government. It simply can't. And right now, the FISA memo would make me just as angry at the government as a whole. It wouldn't be a partisan thing for me, because it's not like Republicans wouldn't. You know what I mean? I mean, I still see two parties, one head. I see one big government. Well, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But you need to remember that the reason that the Department of Justice and the FBI were working to clear Hillary over that email server, it's now come on out. Barack Obama himself was sending classified information to Hillary Clinton over that same weak private email server. So for every Title 18 felony violation that Hillary Clinton was chargeable with, so was Barack Obama. And so apparently the order for all of this stuff came down from the highest level. And again, I'm having a hard time imagining that the FBI would start spying on Donald Trump unless that order came from above either. So yes, it's certainly going to be a very damning memo for the FBI as a whole and the Department of Justice as a whole. But again, this is going to be the Democratic version of Watergate.
If the memo came out, it would be Donald Trump doing a victory dance, just like he's trying to do a victory dance over the tax cut. But actually, I think Paul Ryan gets more credit for the tax cut than Trump does. And that's what I'm saying. I don't see those. I don't see the Republican Party aligned with Trump. So he would have his own celebration party, and I'm kind of thinking they wouldn't give him that victory.
Well, here's the problem. See, the reason.
Paul Ryan and McConnell and the rest of them, you know.
Okay, the reason the Republican leadership is not on board with Donald Trump is they didn't pick him as a candidate. They didn't elect him as the president. Donald Trump is the visible proof that the Republican leadership lost control of their own party. And the same thing almost happened, of course, with the Democrats. And up until this last election, apparently we had a system where the party leadership was rigging the primaries to choose their own candidates, and then it was a battle between the vote riggers as to who actually got to be in the Oval Office. But the GOP, they were against Donald Trump from day one. They put him off to the side for all the debates here, and they were pushing all these other candidates ahead of him, like Ted Cruz, who doesn't even qualify to be president because he's not a natural-born citizen. And they put Jeb Bush, and one by one, Trump just passed them all, and he became the candidate. And the GOP leadership isn't thinking about the party, and they aren't thinking about the voters. They're just thinking about how they have been embarrassed by Donald Trump, and they want their payback.
Okay, well, like I said, we'll talk next week. It'd be very interesting. If they really didn't release it, you and I would just have to we just have to thoroughly discuss it, going, why not? Because it would just give the government as a whole such a huge black eye with the NSA and all the domestic spying since 9/11, and we're sick of it. So now there's a massive abuse of power rising to the level of, like you said, another Watergate, maybe 4 times, 10 times worse than Watergate in criminality. And they wouldn't let the public see that because they know we would just pop off like they wouldn't believe.
All right, well, thank you for your phone call here, and we're going to let you go. Get on back here to some of the news. But, yeah, that's really what's going on. I mean, after Richard Nixon got caught with the Watergate mess, oh, man, the Democrats had a field day. Oh, the GOP is corrupt. They play dirty tricks. and they milked it for everything that they could. And now, of course, the shoe is on the other foot. And the Democrats are now caught with a president who was appeared to be using the nation's intelligence assets to spy on his opposition or on his party's opposition. And for all we know, it may have even happened when Obama was running for re-election, because that's when Richard Nixon and his creep, his plumbers unit, committed the crimes that eventually brought his presidency down. Yeah, that's what this is all about. This is about the Democratic version of Watergate. And if that memo is not officially released, I expect it'll be leaked. And I imagine probably right now there are a lot of smaller, hungry newspapers who would like to take on the preeminence of the Washington Post, and I'll bet their reporters are out there right now working their sources, trying to find out what's going on. So it's not really up to Congress. It's not really up to the Intelligence Committee whether this story is going to come on out or not. It's going to be up to somebody who still remembers what it's like to be a real reporter, and it's going to be up to those of us in the independent media to make sure this issue is placed before the eyes of the American people and kept there. And that's a good handle to use on this. This is the Democrats' version of Watergate, because the original Watergate, Richard Nixon used the spy agencies of this country to spy on and sabotage Democratic candidates so that he could run against McGovern, which he knew he could steamroller over. And that's what is emerging here. Barack Obama used the nation's intelligence agencies to spy on and possibly sabotage the opposite party candidates going into the election. And we have a right to know about that. Now, Representative Aiea is out there saying we have a problem, based on what's inside this memo. And he says Americans do have a right to see the FISA abuse memo. And I agree. I absolutely agree. And, of course, what we're going to get from the Democrats, what we're going to get from the corporate media even, it's national security. Like it's a magic word. We say national security and you just shut up and you don't ask any more questions. They were doing that to Jim Garrison when he was running his trial of Clay Shaw. Every time he tried to get any kind of information, oh no, we can't tell you, it's national security. National security means you caught us, we're lying, we're covering something up, but you're just expected to go along with it. We're going to go to the phones now. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Couldn't hear you for a bit.
Yeah. I do understand the perception if Donald Trump steps in and says, with Mueller basically releasing him or firing him. But, I think there's a reasonable amount of time. We're looking at a year now. This Russiagate hoax, this fraud has been going on for 1 year now. And if Donald Trump can't say it, this is show your cards type deal, then somebody in the administration, or there needs to be a coalition of Republicans saying, this is a witch hunt. We know it's a witch hunt. Show your cards, and let's get this over with. Do you have something? You don't have something? Crap or get off the pot, as my mother would say.
Yes.
And they need to show their cards, and we need to get beyond this because this can drag out forever, and they'll keep saying that they have evidence, but they never show it. I think a reasonable amount of time, it's been a year, it's time to say show your cards.
I would absolutely agree, and I think Republican members of Congress ought to be the ones to do it. It should be the job of Attorney General Jeff Sessions because the special counsel ultimately works for him. Now, remember, the way the special counsel was set up, the way Robert Mueller got the job, did not conform with the way special counsels are supposed to be set up. There's supposed to be a Department of Justice investigation first that finds evidence that a crime has occurred. In other words, the Department of Justice was supposed to find evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. At that point, the special counsel would be appointed. Steve, stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to Steve Elkins here, if you want to contribute and keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, the address to send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And if you want to phone on in and pledge to become a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to Steve Elkins, we're talking about the Robert Mueller special counsel, how Rod Rosenstein just basically said, Mueller, sick him. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. There's supposed to, first of all, be a regular Department of Justice investigation that finds hard evidence that something illegal has been done. And only then is a special counsel empowered and funded to investigate that crime. Now, Mueller was tapped by Rod Rosenstein to look into the issue of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia in the 2016 election. And Mueller has found absolutely nothing. And that's why he's gone off on this fishing expedition. He's looking for anything that he can find to attack Donald Trump with, and that's not the way a special counsel is supposed to work. So, Steve, what's your comment on this? Steve, are you there? Okay, I guess we lost.
No, I'm here.
You're there. Okay, I guess so, your volume was down or something.
Yeah. No, my next question would be, I agree with you, but will we see an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, with enough backbone at some point in time to say, this is it, show your cards, it's over, and we move on? I mean, we're going to wait another 6 months? We're going to wait another 8 months, 9 months? Is this going to drag on forever? But to me, at some point in time, you have to show your cards on this, and they can't continue. By the way, we've spent in excess of $250 million on this already in the first year. I have no idea where $250 million comes in an investigation and how they spend that kind of money, but I mean, this is ridiculous. $250 million for 1 year investigation, and we don't have any evidence to show there's a Russian collusion. None.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge waste of money. I think by now it's one of the longest-running investigations in the U.S. government, and I don't think Jeff Sessions is going to do anything about it. I think he's cut from the same cloth as Loretta Lynch was, that he's part of the deep state, that he's got his own compromise. He's been sitting still for what is obviously a very biased special counsel office. Everybody in it hates Donald Trump, and you cannot claim that this is going to be an objective and unbiased investigation when everybody that's in that special counsel office, it literally goes to bed at night dreaming of burning Donald Trump at the stake alive. And Sessions should have moved to make that panel, that special counsel office, fair and balanced, with an equal number of Trump supporters, and he never did it. And so at this point, I think Jeff Sessions is just another cover-up artist, just like our current FBI director, who's trying to cover up for the FBI now. And it's almost like there really hasn't been any change at all in policy since our last Attorney General and FBI director.
Now, is there, with transparency, the government's always talking about transparency and accounting. Is there anybody who can verify where the $250 million went, how it's been spent from every dollar to every down to every penny? Do we have any idea of where this money went? $250 million.
Well, I certainly don't, and I'm surprised to hear that number. Of course, I'm only looking at Mueller's special counsel office. That's $7 million as of the last report. But I imagine, yeah, that's a lot of money. And to have nothing to show for it, I think that's a good reason for the American people to stand up and say, hey, enough is enough. $250 million an entire year, you've got nothing to show for it. This is over. And I think that certainly the Democrats want this to just keep on running for the next 7 years so they can always go to the newspapers and say, well, Mueller's investigation, they're still looking into that Trump-Russia collusion. But at some point, the American people are just going to say, look, you found absolutely nothing. the Democrats and Mueller are just plain starting to look ridiculous.
Agree. Hey, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And for some reason, I'm getting all these emails from around the world saying that my website keeps going in and coming out again. And my server load is very, very low. And actually, to be honest, I'm not getting the usual level of traffic. So I suspect the hackers who are frustrated over my new server, they're now tinkering with DNS, because some of the emails that I got are saying that they'll go to my website URL and DNS comes back and says, we can't find the IP address. So the hackers are still out there doing what they're doing, which suggests something ugly might be ready to happen. We're going to take a break for commercials here. We'll be back with more news and hopefully your phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And interesting little idea put forward from InfoWars, basically saying that the FISA memo could be made public by any congressman simply reading it on the House floor and just reading it into the record. The congressional record's a public document, and apparently the Constitution protects everything that is said on the floor of the Congress. So that might be another way that this is going to come on out. And this is coming from Judge Napolitano. But you know something? I think in the long run, the government has to release that FISA memo, because if they don't, it sends a message. Something is being hidden. And people are going to be free to let their imaginations roam wild as to what it might be. Spying on Trump? Certainly. What else is in there? More gun and drug running? Maybe. Uranium One? Maybe. More torture? Maybe. More child sexual abuse? Maybe. Everybody's imagination will just go crazy. The damage could actually be worse withholding this memo than releasing it. But of course, the corporate media wants this to go away, and apparently Shepard Smith is out there saying that Nunes' FBI memo is a weapon of mass distraction. You don't really want to see it. Is it obvious how desperate they are to keep this thing under wraps here? Apparently, Donald Trump is a little irked at Jeff Sessions for just sitting back and letting the House Intelligence Committee just hang on to this FISA memo. But again, Trump, I would counsel patience. I mean, you got a lot to do over there in Davos at the State of the Union address. If you do anything that looks like you're interfering with this, the Democrats will just seize on it and turn it into a whole new scandal. And they've already got one. They've already got one. Apparently, Robert Mueller has come on out and said that he knows for a fact that Trump wanted to fire him, apparently last summer, last June. And Trump, of course, is denying this. But, of course, the Democrats are out there saying, well, if Trump wanted to fire Mueller, that's more proof he's got something to hide. He wanted to derail that Russian investigation. It's just more lies. They're not letting up. It's very scary out there right now, what's about to happen here. Now, you remember Dennis Kucinich? Very popular, straight shooter, pro-marijuana legalization, anti-GMO. He's just announced he wants to run for the governor of Ohio. And the polls are saying he just might win. I think that would be a very nice thing. All right, let's get into the war zones, because there's a lot going on here and things are escalating all over the place, and we're still hearing all this heavy military cargo plane aviation going in and out of the airbase down here at the bottom of the hill. Story coming on out from Russia Insider basically saying that the Russians and the Turks have humbled the United States in Syria. And yes, and actually, Syria and the Russians had humbled the U.S. even before this, because remember, when the U.S. had to drop the Assad gassed his own people excuse for the war, they started going with, well, we're going in to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they went on in and they bombed everything except ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And then Russia comes on in and cleans house. And the optics were very, very bad. Now, those of us who were paying attention understood all along that the U.S. was actually aiding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They were arming them. They were supplying them. But to regular Americans who aren't paying attention to what's going on, the optics look really bad. Like we couldn't really win that war against the terrorists until the Russians came on in. So anyway, getting back to the present situation, in northern Syria, it's becoming a test bed for how weak and totally dysfunctional the American empire has become. And it goes back to remembering that the U.S. goal in Syria all along was regime change, to get Bashar al-Assad overthrown and replace him with a compliant U.S./Israel puppet ruler. And it's been something like, what, 6 years, and they haven't been able to do it. Still stuck in Afghanistan, still stuck in Libya. It's not going very well. Now, getting on back to Syria, apparently Turkey is now threatening to attack Manbij. They've gone past their original Afrin target, and they're getting ready to march on Manbij. And apparently ISIS units have attacked positions of the Syrian Arab army in the villages of Kishma and Guraba in Deir ez-Zor. And ISIS is claiming that they've killed several army soldiers and destroyed 2 battle tanks with anti-tank guided missiles. Gee, I wonder where they're getting those from. However, the terrorist group did not overrun the Syrian Arab army defenses, and they were forced to retreat. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I was just need to respectfully disagree with, I don't believe that memo, if it gets out, it's going to take being read on by some congressman who has the gonads to do it. These guys, remember, they would not allow again, the torture report. They would not allow, remember what happened back during the assassination in the 70s. People were getting killed all over the place. We were going to testify there.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember that.
This is all the stuff that they've had on the surveillance. That hasn't really come out. That hasn't come out in open testimony. They marginalized everybody. They were going to kill Julian Assange. They won't this old. They'll do anything to stop this. This, to be read out on the memo, on the record like that, for everybody, that's hard evidence to put people in jail. They won't. This country is run by the secret police on behalf of the bankers.
Yes.
You know who the bankers are? We know.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve.
It's run by the secret police. Yeah, the Federal Reserve, and we know who they are as well.
Yes.
But it's run for the bankers by the secret police. It's the secret policeman's ball, as they used to say, remember?
Yes.
That's who's running this country. And they're not going to let this go. And the bankers won't, the secret police won't, they just won't. They won't allow it. It will take somebody, and somebody will be doing it at the risk of their own lives. Again, I bring back when they bugged their own oversight committee. Nothing really came of that. They bugged their own oversight committee,
yes,
and nothing came of that.
But again, it illustrates the point that I was making about the FISA memo. When they had this huge torture report, and they pared it down and pared it down and pared it down, and they decided not to release it at all, it allowed people to just assume the absolute worst, that the U.S. government was engaging in the most horrific possible tortures. And yes, certain people that should have gone to jail or should have gone to The Hague were spared. But it made, again, the optics were bad. It made the United States look bad in the eyes of the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is out there saying, well, boy, they must have been using really horrible tortures if they're not even going to allow the report out. I mean, obviously, if it had been just waterboarding, we already knew about that, and they would have let the report out. So the fact that they didn't we're free to assume the worst, both with the torture report and now with the FISA memo. So, yes, they may be protecting themselves from legal consequences, but in the process, they're destroying what little remains of the reputation and legitimacy of the United States central government. And again, remember, I'm sure that there were people who didn't want what Richard Nixon was doing to come on out, but it did manage to break free, despite the best government efforts. And again, getting back to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, despite all the wet work and all the bias, they did finally admit that, yes, there had been conspiracies in the assassinations of both Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy. So even then, with all of that, the truth finally came on out.
Well, Mike, you're right. You know, you're right about that. However, the reason why, you know, it never came out, you know, officially, and nobody was ever held accountable for any of that stuff.
We're past the point. So we're past the point where we need things to be acknowledged.
They know we're.
You know, we're past the point where we need anything to be officially acknowledged. There is no provision in the Constitution that says we are obligated to let the government tell us what is real and what isn't. We know the government is lying. So let's just drop waiting for anything official, because you're right. The government will never officially admit that they've done anything wrong, but we know what the government is doing, and we just need to move forward on that. And the fact that the government continues to lie and cover up should not be an impediment. We all agree the government is lying. The government has done some very, very horrible things. The time has come to decide, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? Are we going to allow our children to grow up enslaved to this incredibly corrupt central government? I think most parents are going to say, no, that's not a very attractive option right now.
Mike, I'm with you all the way on that, but I would tell you that the government's response, as it always has, when this stuff becomes common knowledge and they lose credibility and legitimacy, is to take an ever heavier hand. And that's how they'll react.
Well, again, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one where everybody can see it. And we're getting into that stage right now with all this police state stuff. You know, Americans are really looking at all the surveillance and the spying that's going on, and they're getting fed up. So, you know, yeah, everything that the government is able to do to try and keep this under control is only going to hasten the day of their own destruction. There's no magic wand that they can wave that will bring back the people's trust. It's impossible. All they can do, as you say, is become more and more oppressive to just keep the people down. And again, that's a dead-end street. Every regime in history that has tried that, where the people have come to understand how corrupt their rulers are, and the response by the ruler is repression and oppression, it always ends. Gandhi once said, you know, there are always tyrants, and for a time they can seem invincible, but they always fall. And he was right.
God bless old Gandhi.
Yes.
Wish we had one here.
Well, you know, I don't look good in a loincloth, so I'm going to duck out on that one.
Hey, Mike, have a good weekend. By the way, before you go, how is Claire feeling?
She's actually doing a little bit better, but we decided we're going to wait one more week before she does the Friday show with us. And but she is doing a little bit better. It's just taking a very, very long time, and I'm taking the best care that I can of her. But she's actually quite a bit better than when the injury originally happened. She's just having to take it easy, and I'm just trying to convince her not to do anything too reckless. So, you know, yeah, I know you heard it. That was aimed at you. She's in the next room lying down. So obviously I'm doing as much of the housework as I can get away with, and you know, all the stuff for the choir as well. Anyway, thank you very much for the thoughts. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, two things. One, you know, you were talking about Turkey. I know it is a cluster, you know, what's going on right now
yes.
in northern Syria with the Kurds, the Turks, now the Syrian army threatening to enter on the side of the Kurds. And, of course, there's always the threat between the United States and Russia being there also. do you think that Putin may be making a mistake trying to align himself with Erdogan? Because to me, Erdogan reminds me of a snake. If you take a rattlesnake to bed, you can be pretty sure he may very well bite you. Okay, I mean, I would think Putin is making a mistake aligning himself with this guy.
I don't know that he's necessarily aligning himself with Turkey, but basically what he's doing right now is he is basically pulling back. Obviously, Putin is aligned with Bashar al-Assad, and the question is how adversarial does Erdogan plan on being, because that's definitely going to put Russia in a very difficult place. I think if push comes to shove, that Putin will stay aligned with Syria. But what he's doing is he's pulling out and he's letting Syria and Turkey hash this out for themselves because he doesn't want to run the risk of a direct military confrontation with any American forces, knowing that NATO is looking for a reason to start a war with Russia.
Well, I don't think he's really afraid of NATO. I think anything localized to Russian army would probably clean NATO's clock in a couple of days.
I would like to think so, but Putin understands. Putin understands. Even if you win a war, it's still bad for your country. Nobody really wins the war except the defense contractors and the big banks and the politicians. Everybody else loses on both sides.
But the thing is, I think he's pulling away because the northern part of Syria there, and you got the Kurds. We're the ones that are in the mess now.
Yes.
The United States. I shouldn't say we, because I don't go with this policy. I think it's disgusting. I think the troops that are involved there are shaming themselves and shaming the brave troops of wars like World War II, when they really were defending freedom and democracy. But
wait a minute. World War II was as much economic as World War I. Even during the 1930s, Winston Churchill was out there saying that Germany had recovered from World War I. They were becoming an economic threat because they had all the good scientists and they had all the heavy industry and manufacturing. And Winston Churchill said there has to be another war. We have to crush Germany again because they've thrown off their private central bank and we can't compete with them. And that's what World War II was really all about.
I've been watching this thing lately on a History Channel about what if Hitler had won, he actually had ambitions of conquering the United States.
Well, so, I got to be honest. I've seen so much crap on the History Channel. I don't watch them anymore. When they first came along, I said, "Oh, great, this is going to be fine." But no, a lot of the stuff is nonsense. That the show about hunting Hitler, I forget which channel that's on. It may be History, it may be another one. I've already caught them in several flat-out fabrications and lies. So, again, go to my website, read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, and you will be enlightened. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the wars. We're talking about Syria. And the Syrian Kurds are now seeking Damascus protection, saying Turkey is obviously invading. We need the Syrian army to be on our side. Erdogan is saying basically what he wants to do is liberate Afrin and the rest of that area from the terrorists, at which point he pledges he will return it all to Syria's control. So if Assad actually believes that, then the Syrian Kurds are on their own. And again, they have just learned a very painful and too often repeated lesson about what can happen to those who serve United States interests around the world when they're no longer useful. What can happen? Okay, just a second. Yeah, okay. Apparently Claire can't see my website either, so something's going on. I've already filed a support ticket with the ISP, but it's weird. I can see it on my machine, But, oh, I know why, because I've hardwired the IP in my hosts file. Okay, just give me a minute here to figure this out, because there's something obviously going on. And, all right, I'm coming back here. Yeah, the server cannot be found. Okay, something's wrong there. Okay. So getting on back to the news here. Okay, Trump is claiming that he is confounded by Turkey's invasion of Syria. And I don't know why he'd be surprised. Erdogan has made no secret of the fact that he views the Kurds and their attempt to form an independent Kurdistan with the assistance of the United States as a problem. So I don't understand what's going on with that, rather with Trump saying that he's puzzled and mystified by it. But of course the problem is there are U.S. forces in the area. Now 2 advisors, a term you will remember from Vietnam, have already been killed in a Turkish attack on the Kurds, and Trump called up Erdogan and said, please exercise restraint. Didn't get the response he wanted. Turkey is saying they will target U.S. troops if they keep supporting the Syrian Kurds. This is a major escalation. And who knows where it could go? I mean, is Trump really going to be dumb enough to go to war against Turkey inside Syria? It certainly gives him a reason to stay there. But we have all these NATO nations fighting each other. Okay, we got to take a break for station identification. I got to get back to my ISP and find out what's going on. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And yes, apparently hackers are trying to take my site down. I've got my hosting company. Okay. Okay, I can't deal with this till after the radio show. I got to do the radio show now. Let me post a reply, say I am doing. Okay. Okay, odd that they don't know what my site is when I logged in with my login credentials. Must be some new people. Okay, so getting on back to the war zones. Hour number 2 of our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're in this situation right now where Turkey has invaded Syria ostensibly to just deal with the Syrian Kurds. And this, of course, is following on the heels of the collapse of the Iraqi Kurds getting their independence. So the idea of a new Kurdistan, that's over and done with. And because it's not going to happen, the U.S. doesn't need the Syrian Kurds anymore. And in theory, is supposed to be abandoning them. In fact, the U.S. already promised they were going to stop arming them, although they're apparently still getting guided anti-tank missiles. So we don't know what's going on. But we're in this situation where Turkey is saying any U.S. troops that are mixed in with the Syrian Kurds, they are legitimate targets of this military operation. So this thing could still escalate. Now, down in Yemen, apparently there was these mercenaries led by Saudi officers, and apparently they had a bad day. Basically the Houthi rebels, those are tough people. And apparently one of the mercenary bases was annihilated in a surprise attack. Now, Russia is responding to this statement that Defense Secretary Gavin Williamson, Great Britain, told the Daily Telegraph. And basically, he was out there doing the booga booga story about how Russia could attack. Russia's planning to attack. They're spying on energy supplies, and they're going to cut our lifeline. And Russia came on back and said that Mr. Williamson has lost his grasp on reason, and that his comments were worthy of a Monty Python sketch, which if you're my age, you will remember who Monty Python is. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here from Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, the Kurds on my mind, in the sense that when Assad offered them autonomy, they rejected it. When the U.S. moved in and offered to help them, they wanted to form their own state in northern Syria. Now, like you said before, Erdogan is not going to have any of that. He said that from the beginning. Neither is Iraq and neither is Iran. So I think what Putin did was talk to Assad and said, let me handle Erdogan. And since even Putin offered the Kurds to come to Sochi and talk about the setting up of the government, and the Kurds rejected that after the U.S. moved in to help them. But the big picture is all of this is for the greater Israel project, if we were to be honest. Okay, America is just a useful scapegoat. All right, but in the hard time that America is having over there, they're learning. Israel is learning that dog don't sick them the way it used to. All right, and everybody's catching on to the game, and everybody knows that that America is nothing but the attack dog for Israel.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying you're absolutely right. America's military is used for Israel's wars or for the wars for our bankers. I mean, basically, everybody in uniform is just, they're being used like they're mercenaries. They're being rented out like they're a mercenary army.
This is true. This is true. And I'm hearing what you're saying about one day the American people are going to wake up and demand this and that from the government. I mean, you're more optimistic for them than I am, but I'll tell you why you have a reason to be more optimistic, is they have to be programmed to do it. Because right now they've been programmed to be stupid and not want to care about anything except the next sporting event that's going out of season or that's coming into season. But I give it to guys like you who are on the front line, who are programming. This is the fight, okay? It's programming versus programming. And if we keep pushing, and I'm doing my part, I'm always sending people your stuff. I'm always hipping them to other stuff. But this is it. This is the fight. It is an information war. And the information is being used to wake people up, just like it's been used for so long to put people asleep.
Absolutely. And again, we're on one side, the corporate media is on the other side. But you're right. It's an information war. And I hope we're going to win it. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, Donald Trump, of course, is over there in Davos, and he's out there wagging his finger at the disrespectful Palestinians. Trump is apparently very angry at the way the Palestinians treated Mike Pence when he was over there. And so basically, Trump is saying, you will come to the peace table with Israel, or you will lose hundreds of millions of dollars of aids. Now, remember, Donald Trump created this whole situation by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel in open defiance of the United Nations resolutions that says it's a city to be shared. So Trump once again proved that he is Israel's bitch, and he made this mess. And now he's acting all affronted. Oh, you're being disrespectful. You disrespected the Palestinians. You disrespected the United Nations. Now, the Palestinians are saying that if Jerusalem is off the table, the U.S. has no seat at it. Peace with Israel is not possible if the status of Jerusalem cannot be talked about. Now, Palestine is willing to share Jerusalem with Israel. They just want the eastern part of it that was given to them by the United Nations. That's all they want. They want what the UN says is already theirs. Israel's already trying to commandeer it and steal it. Israel wants all of Jerusalem. They want the Palestinians to go away. They want to just kill off the Palestinians. They want the Americans to pay for it. By the way, Michael Herzog had an amazing statistic on his program. Did you know that almost 1/3 of those Palestinians are Christians? And so you have this bizarre situation of churches, Christian churches in the United States of America, sending money to Israel so Israel can kill Christians in the West Bank and in Gaza. I love what Michael Herzog had to say about it. Who would Jesus bomb? Now, John Kerry came on out and basically said that, well, he's undermining President Trump's authority. He's speaking to leaders within the Palestinian Authority. I think he's a private citizen. He may have just violated the Logan Act. But he's out there saying that just you forget about what Trump is saying, and according to Kerry, Trump will not remain in office for a long time. It was reported that within a year, there was a good chance that Trump would not be in the White House. This is apparently originating from John Kerry, reported in the Jerusalem Post. I sure hope Donald Trump gets wind of that. I really do. Now, there is a new book out, and apparently it is a history of Israel's assassination operations. And it talks about things like poison toothpaste. It takes a month to end its target's life. That's the polonium. Armed drones, exploding cell phones, spare tires with remote-controlled bombs, assassinating enemy scientists, finding the secret lovers of the world leaders. And apparently this book says that in its 70 years of existence, Israel has carried out at least 2,700 known assassination operations. And that is, of course, more than any other Western country. Now, Ronan Bergman, the intelligence correspondent for Yediot Aharonot newspaper, persuaded many agents of Mossad, Shin Bet, and the military to tell their stories, some even using their real names. And the result is the first comprehensive look at Israel's use of state-sponsored killings. One example that was in this book was that Israel planned to blow up a passenger plane to try and assassinate Yasser Arafat. So when people are talking about these assassination plots and somebody says, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. No, it isn't. It's out there. Let's get on over here to the Koreas. Will there be a U.S. nuclear sneak attack on North Korea? And it's basically this article, which is in Global Research, is saying the same thing I said yesterday. There is this thaw in relations between the two Koreas. They got together over the Olympics. Now they're talking reunification. They're moving forward on that. Once the reunification happens, the agenda for war is over. North Korea is no longer a threat to South Korea. The U.S. loses its excuse to go into North Korea. And so Global Research is saying that it is very likely that the U.S. will just haul off and go on in with a sneak nuclear attack on North Korea before there's any more progress on reunification. And I'm afraid that that could very well happen, and they're taking a risk, of course, that this could turn into another regional or full-scale war, because China is not going to be happy with the U.S. popping off nuclear bombs so close to their territory. Neither will Russia. Japan is certainly not going to have it. They're going to be reliving Hiroshima and Nagasaki all over again. They'll be having nightmares. The kids will be having nightmares with all that stuff. Now, one of the reasons the U.S. is opposed to reunification of Koreas has to do with China's One Belt, One Road policy. They're trying to spread it all over the place, and it's basically going to be this ultra-high-speed rail and trucking system that will allow Asia to send their exports directly to Europe by a much faster route than cargo ships at much lower cost. And for countries that are heavily invested in shipping lines, that's obviously going to be a bit of a problem. Well, apparently China is now looking at extending the One Belt, One Road project up to the north with what they're calling the Polar Silk Road. that will basically be up along the northern part, may involve some sea routes. Now, unfortunately, they're basing this on the idea that there's going to be less ice up there because of human-caused global warming. And I hope they take another look at that, because it doesn't seem to be the case. Okay. Now, as you know, Donald Trump is floating this plan. It's a compromise plan. He is going to open a way for 1.8 million of the so-called dreamers to become U.S. citizens. And along with that, there will be new restrictions on legal immigration. They're going to start tightening up requirements. And $25 billion in border security to end the illegal immigration problem. Now, nobody's talking about the fact that 1.8 million illegal immigrants is just a tiny fraction of the true problem. That there's probably closer to 5 million illegal immigrants, and those who do not make the Dreamer amnesty, they've got to be rounded up and they've got to be shipped home. And that gets us back to the sanctuary city area. But as is usually the case with anything in Washington, D.C., and especially with anything from Donald Trump, there's opposition coming not just from the Democrats, but even from Donald Trump's own party. They don't want to spend the $25 billion on the wall. They want amnesty. The Democrats want amnesty for everybody, and they still want the open borders. The Democrats are openly admitting they are counting on illegal immigrants voting to swing this November's and the 2020 elections. They're not even hiding the fact that they're stealing the elections, because it is illegal for illegal immigrants to vote. And then I get emails from people saying, well, you know, there's, you know, they live here. They live here now. They should be allowed to vote. They're not supposed to be living here. They committed a crime stepping across the border. We're not supposed to reward criminals with free stuff and the right to vote. Now, lately we've been talking about bad mistakes made by the cops. They're shooting the wrong people. And it seems that apparently even the FBI is not above making a mistake. This happened down in Texas, and it happened yesterday. And apparently it all began when two men barged into this home that the victim shared with his brother and his 12-year-old son. The home intruders claimed to be members of a cartel and claimed that the brothers owed them money. And when the perpetrators tied up the father and his son, they took the father, they ransacked the house. They couldn't find anything. So they took like a PlayStation and an Xbox and a bunch of stuff like that, and they left, and they told the kid, don't call the police. We're going to let your father go just 15 minutes away from here. Well, the boy got out of his restraints, and he called the police, and obviously the victim hadn't been let go by anybody. So the boy's uncle, the brother of the kidnapped victim, returned home, got a phone call from somebody saying they were with a different cartel and asking for $20,000 in ransom money. Police alerted the FBI, who tracked the cell phone number to a hotel. So far, so good. But apparently, when the FBI went to make the arrest of the kidnappers, they shot and killed the kidnapped victim. Little bit of a whoopsie there. So for those of you who still think the FBI are just the absolute top in law enforcement. Now, as you know, we got a caller on the line. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You know that FBI thing. I mean, they may not be the smartest or any of that. They certainly are the richest because they have the biggest budget. I'm on your website, Mike, and I cannot find for the life of me.
You're one of the lucky ones. Yeah, because apparently there's a major DNS problem going on where people can the server can't be found, and our ISP is looking at it, and I'm checking to see if maybe DirectNIC got compromised and somebody changed the IP there.
No, I can see it. Have you tried that website Hide Me? and just, try another country to see if you can get it?
Wait a minute. Somebody has changed my my IP address. That's what happened. Okay.
Did they up your speed too?
No, they didn't. They didn't. Okay.
Well, now you figured it out.
Okay.
So,
yeah, the A record.
On your website, I'm looking for the live video stream link to YouTube, which took me about 10 minutes to find.
It should be up there at the top. It should. Okay, boy, all the computer problems, and I'm trying to do a radio show here at the same time.
I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. I'm going to have to put this into the next commercial break, but it looks like somebody hacked into my DirectNIC and account and basically changed the IP. So I got to get that back, and then I got to change my password. All righty.
That's
all right.
Too bad, Mike.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there should be up at the very top just a little explanation that YouTube's policies have changed. And if you go to the chat, I will get this all fixed eventually. I promise you. Okay, it's just taking a long time between.
Hey, I'm not leaving.
Well, okay. It's all piling up here. We're going to take a break for commercials, and I'm going to try and get some of this stuff dealt with.
Thanks, Mike.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And it looks like somebody changed a configuration somewhere on the network, and all of a sudden my domain registrar is looking at the wrong name servers. And I wish they would notify people when they're going to do this. So I'm going to try and get this all set up during the next commercial break. Meanwhile, Al in Canada, are you still there? No, I guess not. Okay. And again, I apologize that so many things are not working, but I got hit with all this whammy where BAM user went away. YouTube is just almost impossible to work with, and I'm going to have to go with yet another system. And at the same time, I was forced to move to a new server to get away from Spectre and Meltdown. And folks, I'm just one person. I'm just one guy. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century now. And the workload is just amazingly intense. And again, it doesn't look like it was a deliberate hack. It looks like somebody just arbitrarily said, well, it's time to change this, and they broke a bunch of stuff at the same time. So I'm going to try and get this fixed. But I'm just one guy, and there is just a huge amount of stuff to keep working. And it's what's really frustrating for me, of course, is that I keep having to solve the same problems over and over and over again. It's not getting a video stream on my website. It's getting it up and then having to get a new one up, then having to get a new one up, and having to get a new one up. And folks, I really am very, very tired of just doing it all myself. I really am. Okay, now that I've vented, now that I've got my blood pressure level back down where it needs to be, as you know, there have been two phenomena going on. One is that for men and women, there seems to be this campaign of driving them apart and marginalizing them, like they don't really matter. And meanwhile, of course, there's been this intense campaign to perhaps the word normalize would be good, the LGBTQ. And they started out with the vast majority of people saying, well, if that's the way they are, that's the way they are, and don't have a problem with that. But this in-your-face campaign has apparently backfired, because polls are now showing that Americans are now less comfortable with the LGBTQ community because of this constant intrusion and this attempt to have this taught as curriculum in the schools, or wanting to refocus history on famous gay people. And it's causing a great deal of resentment and a little bit of a pushback. I think this would be a good place of live and let live. And if you're, if we're straight, if we're heterosexual, let us Go on being heterosexual. Don't get in the way. Don't get laws passed that we can get fined for telling a woman she's got a beautiful body. Just stop intruding into each other's space. There used to be a time when there was supposed to be respect for personal space. The liberals certainly have that. You know, oh, you're invading my space. But then the liberals will invade your space. It's a one-way street here. Okay, let's see. Ooh, we got a bunch of callers on the line here. Let's go to Don in the Philippines. And Don, I'm probably going to have to take you over the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, well, in the first place, yeah, I can get your website here, so maybe it has something to do with foreign countries apparently can receive your website, but not people in America. Maybe it's a diabolical plan. They're trying to get everybody that's a Mike Rivero fan to evacuate the United States and go to a foreign country so they can pick up. No, it's just a joke, Mike. I'm sorry. But I wanted to go back to what I was talking about yesterday about the FBI. And I kind of went on a tangent when I was talking about Bobby Fischer and his mother. But the point is, they were poor people living in Brooklyn. They didn't have any expensive lawyer, but they knew that you don't talk to the FBI. You just don't say anything to them. And flash forward to this year when he got Michael Flynn was paying all this money to his lawyer. He should sue the guy for malpractice now. He's looking at prison time. Whereas if he just would have, instead of not had any lawyer and watched this documentary and listened to Mrs. Fisher's advice and just say, I have nothing to say to you, and he would not be looking at any prison time. I don't understand why anybody would talk to the FBI. That was my point.
Well, you're well advised to not do that. And certainly, same thing with the police. It's like that old Miranda warning. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And that does apply to the FBI as well. You know, but under certain circumstances, you can be compelled. You know, you have to remember your Fifth Amendment rights. You know, the right against self-incrimination, and you have to also remember you have a right to an attorney that you can invoke at any time. All right, listen, Don, have you got more?
Yeah.
All right, stay on the line. Going to put you on hold here. Going to try and get my DNS. Apparently, DirectNick had a problem. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I finally figured out what was going on here. For some reason, and after the radio show, I'm going to get onto them, my domain registrar, they must have had something crash, and they went to a backup, and the backup was apparently from before I moved to my new server. And so all over the world, the domain was pointing at the wrong name servers. And apparently that happened just this morning, and it was propagating through the system more and more. But I've corrected the name servers, and hopefully the site will be reappearing where you are, however long it takes for the DNS propagation to reach your part of the world. Obviously, going into a weekend, it's not really going to be an issue until Monday. All right, so we're talking with Don in the Philippines. And Don, I can give you my full attention now. What's going on?
Yeah, there's a difference between talking to your local cops. They cannot charge you with lying to them. It's only a federal officer that can put you in jail, and the FBI loves to do that. I will talk to my local sheriff, you know, because I don't have to fear that he's going to catch me in a lie and or an inconsistency, and I'll be looking at jail time. And Mike Flynn didn't do anything against the law as far as we know. They caught him in, I don't know exactly what his story was a little bit different from time to time. He pled guilty to lying. But,
well, basically, they caught him, and basically he denied having a meeting with Russians, and it could have been just a simple goof where he simply forgot. But yeah, they went after him with that because they're trying to build the case about Russia collusion. But it was a nothing burger. Now, if you're talking to a police officer, they can't arrest you right there for lying to them. But obviously, if you are arrested later on, the fact that you did lie would be entered into evidence against you during your trial.
And the trial, but they can't just throw you in jail for lying, which the FBI has that's a bad law. The FBI is no better than the county sheriff, in my opinion, probably a lot worse. and there's a law that says that they can throw you in jail for lying to a federal officer, and that's wrong. I'll let you go, Mike.
All right. Yeah, I think that's the whole point of putting people under oath. Is if they lie, they've committed perjury. But just automatically saying you can't lie to a federal officer, you can go to jail for that, isn't that subjective? The federal officer may truly believe that you're lying to them, even if you're telling the truth. That's a law that's wide open for abuse. Okay, we're going to talk to Gearhart in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Gearhart. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. Just a quick follow-up from your first hour. You mentioned declassifying the memo, some information from InfoWars. There was an excellent interview done by Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, dated December 26th, 2014, day after Christmas, 2014, where she interviewed, at the time, a junior senator from Alaska, Mike Rivero.
Yes.
Who worked with Daniel Ellsberg at the time and some other people, where he introduced the Pentagon Papers into the official congressional record. And once it's introduced, you don't have to stand there and read page by page, volume by volume. Here's the documents. It's introduced. It's part of the record. It's now open for the media to comment on, report on, disclose or not report on, whatever their intent is. But it was a very interesting interview, if it's still archived there, December 26, 2014. And he explained the procedure. It was about a half-hour interview, and it was a good interview to listen to and learn what they did at the time.
Okay.
Well,
yeah. Well, I mean that's all becoming current again because of this movie, The Post. And but again, as I mentioned yesterday, I read a review saying that for people who know the story about the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg and the burglary of his psychiatrist's office and the rest of it, the film is trying to basically rewrite history a little bit. So I don't know that I'm going to bother with it all that much.
Right. Well, this was nothing to do with the movie. It was just an interview with Gravel.
Yes.
From at the time he was just a junior senator, and he explained, and they related to after the fact that John McCain could have done the same thing with the torture memo. Okay, it's a provision under the Constitution which allows, I believe, it's senators to do this and to introduce it into the congressional record. So he explained it quite well.
Okay, so it's confined to the senators because Judge Napolitano was basically saying a member of the House of Representatives has that same right.
Okay, I'm going from memory, and again, it's been probably a year or two since I listened to the interview, but okay. I stand corrected, okay? But it was a good interview if you get a chance to listen.
All right, well, I definitely will.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to move over to Richard in North Carolina. Aloha, Richard. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, as everybody says, aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
I have a very trivial thing to put into the pie. It has to do with the problems you've been having. It may be a symptom that you could use to diagnose even further what you need to do, but
no, I've identified the problem. I've identified the problem. For some reason, my domain registrar reverted to the settings that were used to point at the last server I was using, and of course that last server doesn't exist any longer. And so I've already corrected the problem, and it's propagating through DNS. So by this evening, you should be seeing the site again.
Oh no, I'm not having a problem right now, but I wanted to let you know that I had a lot of problems in the past few weeks getting to your site with Firefox, but when I would use Tor, I could do it.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about Firefox having issues with my site, but again, we just moved to a brand new server that's a lot more powerful, it's a lot faster, a lot more secure, and so you're going to have a lot fewer problems with that once the name server problem is taken care of.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. I just wanted to throw information into the pot.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, have a good night as well. All right, we're going to let you go. And the phone lines are open again. And I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying whether they can or cannot see the site. And because of the way DNS works, basically the DNS tables, the data tables, are propagated from one DNS server to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And it can take up to 24 hours for these things to get where they need to go. And so where you're still seeing my site, the change to the name servers may not have reached you yet. And so you may see an outage later on today, followed by restoration. The problem is solved, and by this time tomorrow, everything should be just fine. So that's what we're, and again, I'm doing the best that I can with all of these issues. There's only one guy here. There's only one system engineer here. All right, so we're getting on back to this issue about how the LGBTQ community, in pushing so hard to basically get in your face and say, yeah, we're here and you should accept us, which was weird because for the most part they were being accepted before. They've actually harmed their own public image. People are very concerned about how they're trying to take over control of the curriculum, and they're also concerned about how some of these individuals just seem to be taking advantage of the situation. And a good example of that happened out in Chicago. There's a Chicago man who's accused of sexually assaulting 3 young girls. And his defense is that he thinks he's a little boy trapped in an adult's body. Well, heck, I'm that, but that doesn't give me the right to go on out and sexually assault anybody. So anyway, there's this guy, Joseph Roman, 38, is charged with predatory criminal sexual assault from repeated attacks on 3 girls ranging in age from 6 to 8 years old. And apparently this guy was a friend of the girls' families at the time of the attacks. But basically, he says he's a 9-year-old trapped in an adult's body, and he was ordered held without bail. And by golly, I agree with that one. But this idea of I'm something else trapped in whatever, it's really out of control. Although I know I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. You can ask my wife, Claire. So since we're having so much grief with our computer systems today, let's do some stuff about computers. And there's a very interesting article that came out of Blacklisted News, basically quoting a study that says if a top major cloud service provider were to go offline for as short as 3 days, it could cost the U.S. economy $15 billion with a B. And there have been some cases in the early days of the cloud where cloud service have gone down unexpectedly, or they've had data problems and data has been lost. Now, I do not agree with the cloud. I know it's being shoved at us. I mean, it's a real effort to go through the iPhone and turn off all the cloud-related stuff, and some of it you can't turn off. You'll load your music, in this case Claire's music, into iTunes because you want to be able to play it to somebody who might want to program Claire's music, and then you have to wait because it's been sent to the cloud, which means if you're away from a Wi-Fi port, yes, you can get it over the cell phone system, but if you're away from the cell phone tower, if you don't have that communication, you're being made dependent on that electronic umbilical cord in the sky, and I resent that. And the second issue, of course, is illustrated by this article. Having all of your data in one place, yes, it makes it easier for the government and marketing people to scan your data for information they can find useful, but it makes it vulnerable. And I want to share an experience I had many, many years ago, before I take more phone calls. Back when I was still working in Hollywood in the early days of computer animation, there was this company called Digital Productions, very simple name. And their big selling point was they had acquired a Cray 1 supercomputer, fastest machine at its time. And it was a bad business decision because the Cray operated in the Fortran programming language, and all of the existing code for computer animation had been written in C under Unix. And so it obligated digital productions to basically reinvent the wheel, write their own rendering code on the Cray. But the big problem was everything went through that Cray computer. And when it broke down, and it broke down a lot, everybody got to go home until the repair technicians could come on out. Now, the practice today in computer animation shops is render farms, which are these rooms full of very inexpensive racked processors, and each one is doing a frame, and they run in parallel. And if 1 or 2 or even 5 of these little blades crash, it doesn't impact the production that much. Parallelism really is the safest approach, and that's another reason why I'm opposed to these cloud systems. And this article says, yeah, we're all being dependent on the cloud. If the cloud system fails, we're all going to be losing money. We're going to be losing our businesses. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, good day to you. Yeah, Michael, first off, Trump today in Davos, before he left there, he's telling the media was there that it's all fake news in the New York Times and all this with this Mueller nonsense. That should have already been ended. This is insanity with this Mueller and this insanity of what they're trying to do to Trump with the witch hunt. But now, Michael, what I do want to talk about is Trump is actually putting the Democrats on the spot because he's saying, okay, we'll give you 1.8 million illegals become our dreamers. And now basically you have this Nancy Pelosi come out with this now a few minutes ago saying that Donald Trump's trying to turn America white again. What the heck is that all about? This nitwit, this freak show woman we have there in California with telling Donald Trump trying to make America white again when he's going to bring in 1.8 million brown illegals. I mean,
well, Nancy Pelosi wants all of the illegals currently in the country to be made legal, to be given amnesty, and she wants those borders to remain open. And we've been hearing about these liberals talking about their goal is the browning of America. And that's part of this globalist New World Order objective of basically blurring everybody together so that 2 or 3 generations down the road, we're all going to look the same, we're all going to talk the same, we're all going to smell the same, we're all going to dress the same. It's going to be just like George Lucas predicted in THX 1138. There'll be no diversity. There'll be no difference anywhere on the planet. We'll just be this giant hive of human worker bees working for the bankers.
Well, Michael, I think Nancy Pelosi has Alzheimer's. You notice how she's doing the twitch all the time? She's twitching.
Yep.
I think her face has been stretched so much for the $1 million operation she's had on that face for plastic surgery. It's literally caught up to her brain has shrunk to a size of a pea.
Well, that dimple on her chin.
Watching that woman.
You know the dimple on her chin? That used to be her belly button.
Yeah. I believe that. Absolutely. But Michael, these people in San Francisco keep electing her. And you know what? Why don't they take all these millions of illegals that she wants?
Tom, we are told they keep electing her, but it's like the same situation with Arizona and McCain. I can't find anybody in San Francisco who actually votes for her. Election fraud is a reality in this country. Election fraud is a reality in this country. We just have to accept that. And we look at these politicians and we don't understand why they're hanging onto their office. Yeah, they're cheating. I mean, obviously Pelosi is counting on illegal immigrants to help her hang on to her office.
Absolutely. And same thing in Arizona, Michael. So my brother lives out there. I have family all over Arizona, and nobody in my family and all their friends vote for John McCain. However, he still gets elected. I don't understand it. It's unbelievable. And to see what happens now in the 2018 election. But I think the Democrats have really been exposed with this immigration nonsense. I think the Americans are going to really wake up and they're going to really expose. I think Trump's going to hold on to in 2018. He's going to gain about 60 Senate seats. That's what I'm thinking. I'm really hoping.
Well, I hope so too here. Yeah, but again, election fraud is epidemic in the country. We learned that in 2016, and we got to do something about that. Okay, well, listen, Tom, I'm going to let you go. We got to.
One more thing, George Soros. I wish Trump would have talked about George Soros at Davos, that he should be arrested. I don't understand why they haven't rounded that guy.
Yeah,
Soros.
I agree with you there. Tom, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go back to the telephones here. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I just feel so happy about how far we've gotten in the war against the deep state. I mean, to think, 5 or 6 years back when I was doing my 9/11 DVD distributions and getting really fed up because the American people weren't really doing anything about it, and then to have Trump just come out of the blue and then watch the deep state overplay their hand to such a degree that maybe, Trump might have been able to make a deal with them, but not anymore. I mean, he's on our side now. It's like, and anybody that goes up against Trump so far ends up being broken by him. It's almost like the hand of God is on this guy. I've never seen anything like it. So I'm actually ecstatic that the deep state has made such a stupid decision, not just to go against the United States president, but also a president that actually seems to have the ability to just run circles and set traps on his enemies. I think I've never felt this positive about the potential of seeing these criminals get what's coming to them since when the Republicans took over in '95, when I was hoping they'd look into Vince Foster, which they didn't.
No.
But this is different because once again, it's amazing to me. I was worried they were going to try to make a deal with Trump, but the knives came out and they're trapped. I mean, there's actually word that part of these text messages are going to be meetings and informants where people were threatening the president of the United States. I mean, they might have really, like I said,
that's
I'm just
actionable.
pleased that they're.
That is actionable. These texts where they're talking about physically harming the president, those are legally actionable, and something does need to be done about it. Now, the reason that the Republicans didn't look into Vince Foster is because, again, this goes back to what was going on in Arkansas with the Central Intelligence Agency while Clinton was governor of that state. And, Vince Foster had become very uncomfortable with what he was being asked to do, because it was one thing to do it in the governor's office of the state of Arkansas, but this was the White House, and sometimes being in the White House can have a strange effect on people. It also happened to John F. Kennedy. I mean, growing up, he was a playboy, he was rich, he, had his way with the girls, and was a bit of a goofball. And then all of a sudden, he wins the election. He's in the White House, and all of a sudden, it apparently changed him, and he said, I'm going to really try and do this job right, which, of course, immediately started making enemies all around, leading to his assassination. Now, as far as Donald Trump is concerned here, I'm not as positive as you are. I would like to see him put on those presidential brass knuckles and start going to town on this, because it's clear he's still surrounded by people who are trying to obstruct any investigation. And when you look at that deep state, that web of drug and Clinton Foundation corruption and Uranium One, and now the new one that's coming on out about the shipping container shipping port down in Florida, everybody's dirty with some of it. And so it's basically Washington, D.C., it's one dragon with two heads. And one head says Republican, one head says Democrat, but it's really all the same monster. Anyway, listen, Joe, we got to let you go for station identification. We'll be back with another phone call right after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, Claire is finally starting to feel a little bit better. We're sort of the danger area where she thinks she's almost better and she wants to get up and do things, but she needs to rest. So we're going to wait one more week before we have her come back for her usual third-hour appearance. But she really wanted to be here today. I'm the villain. I'm the bad guy. I said, no, you can't do it. You got to be, resting and taking care of your back. All right, we're going to go to the telephones here. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, how you doing, Mike? I just want to say before I get on my topic, about that person who is trans age or raping that young girl. Well, if they're going to go that, then I'm Trans Financial. I'm going to go into Mar-a-Lago golf club and say, I want to be a member. I'm just a rich guy trapped in a poorhouse.
Well, I keep telling everybody, you know, I'm a rich talk show radio host trapped here in this body out here in Hawaii. Or I self-identify as a very rich talk show radio host. So, you know, if you don't send in more money, then you're being hostile. You're invading my space, or whatever the liberals like to say. Anyway.
Well, anyway, I like my free space, not my safe space. But getting on, I remember 32 years ago, I was at a community college. The day was very cold. I lived in Florida at the time, and I remember the day that the Challenger exploded. And the thing is, I'm very excited. One thing I'm excited about this administration is they're getting ready to start up the space program again. And just like the Challenger is like it's going to happen when we try to go to Mars, go back to the moon, there's going to be a lot of risk taken, and some astronauts might die.
Yes.
You know, in this endeavor.
Well,
and I just think we can't be afraid of the challenge.
Well, again, the big stink about Challenger was that the problem was known about, that there had been burn-throughs on those O-rings on flights before Challenger, but the burn-through had basically pointed out in a harmless direction, and the onboard flight computer was able to correct the course. And the astronauts were concerned about it, and when they were trying to reuse the segments, it was a great deal of trouble to try and get them together, and it should have been dealt with before. Yes, we're going back out into space, and yes, space is a high-risk environment, but let's not shortchange the safety. And I remember when NASA went through this major transition. It was called the new NASA, and control over the space missions was taken away from the scientists and the engineers and turned over to some managers, MBA types, political appointees, with the idea that they were going to make space business-like and cost-effective. And the first thing they did to show their muscle is they got rid of the round blue NASA logo and replaced it with that red word NASA, which was called the worm. And I'm glad to see that they've gone back to the original traditional logo, because that's the one we all grew up with. But after that is when we started seeing all kinds of problems, because NASA was being managed by people who hadn't grown up with the space program, and they just kept pushing lower cost, fast schedule. And the real tragedy about Challenger was that the engineers at Morton Thiokol, who had designed and built those solid rocket engines, called up NASA and said, do not launch today. The temperature was below freezing last night, and those O-ring gaskets do not respond to the cold weather. Don't launch. And NASA management, they were aware that the teacher in space was on board Challenger, and the whole world was watching, and management was out there to prove that they could run space missions on a schedule, and just like a regular airline. And they went ahead and they launched, and the frozen O-rings burned through, and in this case, that plume of flame hit a structural member holding the SRB onto the external tank, and it broke loose at the bottom, pivoted up, plunged in, and basically tore the whole ship apart. And it was a real tragedy. And of course, anybody who experienced that, we're all going to remember that, where and when we were. It's like when we learned Kennedy was assassinated. In my case, I was in Italy, in the town of Milan, and I was sent there by this animation company I worked for in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, to help them set up a production facility. And it was the end of the day, and I went back to my hotel. And my Italian, I was trying to learn as much Italian as I could, and I was getting by. But I turned on the TV news, and there was the Challenger sitting on the launch pad, and the news reporter was clearly excited, and he was talking so fast, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. So I experienced the Challenger explosion like the people at the Cape. I had no idea it was coming. It just went up and off, and I'm saying, you know, great, way to go, Judy, because I'd worked with one of those crew people just 3 months before at the Houston Manned Spacecraft Center, and it just bang, and it went, and it was a shock. And I got on the phone, and I called up friends at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory from all the way in Italy, and I said, is what I'm seeing what really happened? And they said, yes, the crew was lost. So, yeah, it's one of those events that does define an age, if you will. But I'm very supportive. Go ahead.
Well, even like the people in the old Soviet Union were not really rejoicing about it. They were actually mourning too, because they had their own space program, and it's like nobody was rejoicing in the world that day. But things going back to the problems. I looked at the videotape this morning of the Challenger exploding, and when the mission control said throttle up, boom, that's when it exploded.
Well, no, that was a complete coincidence. That's a complete coincidence because when you're launching a spacecraft up, lower down in the atmosphere, you're having to deal with high atmospheric pressure and aerodynamic stress. And there's a point in the ascent path called max Q, which is the point where the aerodynamic forces are at their maximum. And in order to minimize the possibility of damage, you're usually going at a reduced throttle setting on the main engines, the 3 engines at the bottom of the shuttle. And so when the flight controller is saying throttle up, he's saying you're past the max Q area, you can go to 100% power. But the fact that the shuttle blew at that moment was a complete coincidence, because the problem was not with the main engines, it was with the SRBs.
Oh, but anyway, Mike, have a good weekend. Tell Claire to get well.
I will.
I've been pitching for a wireless headset if she has to do it from bed.
Well, that would be for an interesting video. And no, the problem is that this chair that I have in here for her, I don't think it's good for her to sit in. I actually invited her to just walk on in and put on the headset and say hi for a few minutes, but she decided she wanted to wait till next week when she can do the whole hour. Anyway, George, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. That walk down memory lane. One of the reasons that the Russians were very unhappy about Challenger was they had their own shuttle program called the Buran, and it had actually flown once successfully unmanned, but when the Challenger blew up, it was also, of course, the end of the Soviet Union, so the Buran is now a museum piece. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But it was interesting, 6 degrees of separation, because I'd actually been on board Challenger when it was being constructed in Southern California. And when I was there working in Europe, people were asking me, they knew about my background with NASA, and I said, yes, I'd been on the Challenger. And then, boom. It was very, very sad. And I remember when, I think it was Columbia went down, and they were making a big deal about Ilya Ramon being the first Jewish astronaut. That's not true. Judy Resnick was Jewish. Very quiet about it, very proud about it. Also an amazing piano player. All right, let's get on back to current events here. I've had enough of a walk down nostalgia, something I'm trying to avoid as I get OLDER. Apparently, George Soros is now on the warpath for some reason against Facebook and Google, which is rather amazing considering that Facebook and Google have been very supportive of his efforts to silence voices opposing globalism and the New World Order, or conservatives in general, but apparently got up there at the World Economic Forum, and basically Soros said social media companies influence how people think and behave without them even being aware of it. Well, yes, we know that part of it's true. But he's saying Facebook and Google's size means they become obstacles to innovation. Can't argue with that either. And he basically said that these are near monopoly distributors and they should be run as public utilities. And this is the first time that George Soros has ever said anything that I agree with. The internet as a whole should be regulated as a public utility. We're all dependent on it. And I'm in agreement with all those lawyers who are saying that the FCC's mischaracterization of the internet in order to allow it to be privatized and carved up to the highest bidder was inappropriate. Common carrier should have applied to the internet just as it applied to the telephone system when the telephone system was broken up, which caused no end of headaches for everybody. Now, a lot of people have iPhones. A lot of people have older iPhones. They can't afford the newer iPhones. They're still upset about this intentional slowdown of the battery. But Apple has just announced that there is a future update for the iPhones, for the older iPhones, that will have a manual battery saver feature, that where you can turn it off if you need the speed, or turn it on if you want your battery to last. And it's going to be appearing on the iPhone 6, 6 Plus, SE, 6S, 6S Plus, 7, and 7 Plus models. I didn't realize that the 7 was susceptible to this. Gosh darn those people at Apple. Now, last year, the FCC, under Trump's appointed chairman, Ajit Pai, created this advisory committee for high-speed internet access, saying that it planned to bring broadband to more people. And one of the people serving on this panel, this committee, was San Jose's mayor. And apparently he quit the committee in protest today, saying that the telecommunications industry basically had taken control of the initiative and was advancing its own interests at the expense of consumers, which is, of course, what corporations like to do. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. We've been talking about the very heavy snow that Tokyo has had, heaviest snow in something like 2 decades now. It's still coming on down. And Tokyo just recorded their lowest temperature in almost half a century. And 48 years. 48 years. And as a result, Tokyo ambulance companies are saying they're seeing a lot of business, people who are slipping on the ice and falling, plus the influenza, the Japanese flu, is hitting a lot of people there, a lot of traffic accidents. So it's a very, very busy season for the ambulance drivers. Now, over in Shanghai, China, they got a heavy snow, their first in a decade. And amazingly enough, the carbon Nazis are still all over the media with basically 2 stories. 2017 was the hottest year on record. Don't look at the record, just take our word for it. Hottest year on record. And all of this snow and ice is caused by global warming. They really do think that you are stupid enough to fall for that. That because the world is getting warmer, we're going to get more snow and more ice. They're not giving up. They still want your money in the carbon taxes. They still want your obedience to a global environmental authority that will tell you how small, how tiny a house you must live in from now on. Or some of them are just worried about protecting their reputations, like Bill Nye, the not very scientific guy, who was a champion of global warming. And now, with the globe cooling, going into a new Maunder minimum, they're out there saying, well, we'll see the effects of the warming. It's there. It's just hidden. Remember when they claimed the global warming was hidden at the bottom of the ocean? Hello? Ever hear of convection? Warm water rises. Cold water sinks. If there was any global warming at the bottom of the ocean, it would be at the top of the ocean. They're just not giving up. Anybody who thinks there's no such thing as a conspiracy against the people, this is one you can point to. And it involved Al Gore and all of his carbon brokerage people. It involved the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, Great Britain, Penn State here in this country, NASA, NOAA, most of the so-called science channels on cable TV, which these days are less and less scientific. Have you noticed how tabloid they're getting? Shows about ghosts and psychic phenomenon. Well, they just discredited themselves. Boy, there seems to be a lot of illnesses going around the world right now. We have the Aussie flu, which is what hit us here in Hawaii, the Japanese flu, which is hitting, obviously, Japan, the French flu, and some combination of all of those are sweeping across Europe and have really hit Great Britain. They're running out of room in the hospitals. They've had to put off all non-emergency medical care. Then we have that bleeding eye disease down in Uganda. It's a hemorrhagic fever that has been identified as very close to the disease that wiped out the Aztecs. Apparently, they were able to get a sample of the DNA of the pathogen that killed the Aztecs from scrapings from the teeth of the remaining bodies here. Now, apparently, down in Brazil, they're having an outbreak of yellow fever. This is turning into a very sick world right now, and apparently it's already leaving Brazil. A case confirmed in the Netherlands for a traveler who recently visited Sao Paulo. Now, Sao Paulo has closed its zoo and its botanical gardens, and apparently the outbreak has led to 70 deaths, and it's showing no signs of slowing down whatsoever. And apparently now the big Inhotim Art Park is saying that all visitors will have to show proof of yellow fever vaccination to be allowed to enter. They're saying the measure was preventative, and no case of the yellow fever had been found there. And I understand they're trying to prevent the spread of the disease here. Sometimes economics can get in the way. Many years ago, when I was doing some projects down in Australia, the airline was starting to bring on the long-reach 747-400 that could make the trip from the United States to Australia direct. But in order to keep passengers in the shorter range jets, keep them flying, they had this deal. If you did a round trip to Australia, you could pick your stopover destination for one leg of the flight. So I figured Tahiti, never been there. And so I stopped off at Tahiti and got off the plane, and we're outside the airport before they finally get around to telling us that we could be exposed to dengue fever, which at that point in my life, it was just a name in a headline, and it was scary. People die from dengue. And then when I actually contracted it, I found out that for the vast majority of people, it's not that serious. 2/3 of the people who get it won't even show symptoms. Only like 3% develop the serious hemorrhagic symptoms, and for the rest, it's like a case of the flu, which is how it hit me. So it was a little bit overstated. I remember when I got stung by a Portuguese man-of-war, and I'd heard all these horror stories, and yeah, it hurt. It wasn't that big a deal. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we've got a few stories left to close out the day, but the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Still waiting for DNS to get our site back up online. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and getting on back to the medical issue. One of the very frustrating things that has been happening with Claire and her back is that she's dealing with a lot of pain. And because of this, all of a sudden, this opioid crisis, doctors are pulling back and saying, no, we can't prescribe that anymore. And so people who are legitimately, genuinely in pain are being left in pain. So we're looking for something, down at the down-to-earth health food stores. Story coming on out of Post News D2, fentanyl. Now, fentanyl is a synthetic opiate, and it's linked to thousands of deaths every year, but doctors are still prescribing it, although not around here. But yes, and it has the potential to be abused. It's very addictive. The stuff that's out on the street, though, can be dangerous. We went through a situation when I was living in North Hollywood where there was this phony heroin. They were calling it China White. There's a real heroin that's called China White. This wasn't it. They called it China White. Was a variant on fentanyl, and anybody who used it came down with a permanent case of Parkinson's disease. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, regarding the memo that you're talking about, this is why I think Donald Trump is being blackmailed. Okay, if he has a memo that could destroy the Democratic Party and the fact that he's president and his party controls the Senate and the House, he should be able to get any bill that he wants passed, and the Democrats shouldn't even attempt to stop them from doing certain things.
Well, what Donald Trump is trying to do is avoid giving the Democrats any more fuel to scream obstruction of justice. And so, and I'm in agreement with him. As frustrating as it is to just see this drag on and drag on and drag on, Trump needs to sit back and let the machinery of government be seen to work the way it's supposed to, or more importantly, be seen by the American people to break down the way it certainly broke down during the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. But if, now they're trying to claim that Trump wanted to fire Mueller last June, so they can scream, see, he's got something to hide. They're just trying to keep this Trump-Russia collusion story going as long as they can, even though there's no evidence. But I think Trump is wise to keep his hands off of this thing, and I'm sure there's a lot of back-channel discussion going on. But Judge Napolitano, I think, is right. Somebody in the House of Representatives just needs to stand up and read it into the congressional record, and then it's out.
Well, that's what happened with the Pentagon Papers. It was read in the congressional record back in 1972, I believe, or
yes.
71.
Yep.
But this is another concern. With this memo, I think it would hurt Republicans just as well it would hurt Democrats, because there are some Republicans who don't like Trump, and they've been dealing with the Obama administration in the past, and they had done stuff that would really feel like they're in bed with the Democrats.
Well, from the reactions that we're seeing from everybody on Capitol Hill, this memo is very damaging to a lot of people. It's certainly going to be the worst scandal for the FBI since COINTELPRO. This is going to be the Democrats' version of Watergate. And yes, a lot of people are going to get tangled up in this thing, but it has to be done. Trump promised he was going to drain the swamp. Somebody just handed him that little chain to the plug in the drain.
This is true. And the other problem, if we had a real media like they did back in the 70s, all this stuff could have been brought out. People would have dealt with it, and things would have been better. But again, the last time that this country did the right thing was during Watergate, and since then it's been downhill. And all these reporters are basically, like you always call them, political whores, or what do you call them, prostitutes?
Prostitutes and correspondents.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go. Before I let you go, your caller from L.A., Pat, what is his name?
Peter.
The guy from L.A. that calls in. Peter. Tell him, or he might be listening, that he sounds like Pat Leahy of Vermont. He sounds exactly like him.
Okay.
So, well,
I'm sure you mean it as a compliment, and I'm sure he'll take it as a compliment.
Right. It should be a compliment, yeah, because I like his voice, and it does make a lot of sense. All right, take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Have a good weekend. Boy, am I glad it's Friday. I am so glad it's Friday. All right, now, getting into the world of vaccines, and again, everywhere we went with Claire, urgent care, have you had your flu shot? We don't need it. We just had the flu. That's why we're in here anyway. They're still pushing it out there. And we're telling this practitioner, we know the stats. This flu vaccine is only 10% effective, and, there's a lot of harm caused by these things. And it goes in one ear and out the other one. And, before we walk out, last chance, get you the flu shot. No, thank you. I don't think so. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. There's a caller on the line, and we've got a few more things to share with you from the world of medicine, and especially about vaccines and so forth. So we're going to take a little bit of a break here. I'm going to go check on my lady love, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And it looks like some people are once again able to see the website because they're starting to post member stories, and the numbers are going back up. So we're over that crisis. Now, for some of you, because of the way DNS propagation works, could be tomorrow morning before you're able to see the site again. But that's where we are. Oh, okay. Let's go to the phones here. Rhonda in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I heard you talking about natural painkillers for Claire.
Yes.
And if you go to drx.com, he's got an article on 8 natural painkillers. You could probably find one there. One of them's cayenne pepper. I think it's, you know, different things for different things.
Okay.
Going on with you, so.
Is that spelled? Is it spelled out drx.com or is it just?
It's DRAXE.com. So Dr.
DRAXE.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like Dr. Axe. Okay. All right. I'm looking at this 12 natural. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll take a look at that.
You should find there. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, then.
All right. Thank you
That's
very
all I
much.
wanted. You're welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Now, let's see. Okay. All right. No more callers on the line here, so let's clear that out. All right. So we were talking about vaccines and vaccinations. We're talking about the sales pitch is always out there. Big money being made on these vaccines. Anytime anybody gets sick, they push the vaccines. Every time the vaccines make somebody sick, they push the vaccines. So there's an organization out in California called Physicians for Informed Consent. And they recently reported in the British Medical Journal that every year in the United States, 5,000, an average, 5,700 children will be given seizures from the combined triple vaccine, the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. And this finding is derived from results of the most statistically powered safety study ever to measure the association between MMR vaccination and febrile seizures. And the data pool was more than 500,000 children. They were evaluated, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, from a Danish population that is relied on globally to examine vaccine safety. And the results showed that seizures from the MMR vaccine occur in about 1 out of every 640 children up to 2 weeks following the vaccination. So applying this risk of seizures to the 3.64 million U.S. children vaccinated with a first dose of MMR every year results in about 5,700 annual MMR vaccine seizures. These things are very dangerous. But we live in a country where bad products, dangerous products, can be sold as long as they're making money and the companies are paying taxes and keeping the bankers happy. Consumer product safety just doesn't exist anymore. How very third world we've become in that regard. Now, yesterday we ran a story in which we found out that, at least in California, children are still being given vaccinations that contain the mercury-based preservative thimerosal because of an exemption granted by the California Health Department on the basis of that mercury-free vaccines were in short supply. They just weren't making them. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll allow them to keep on using those mercury-based vaccines. Mercury is a neurotoxin. Exposure to it causes mental illness. There is a considerable amount of evidence that it is this mercury-based preservative in vaccines that has triggered the epidemic of autism sweeping our country. So, another story out of Global Research up in California. In the decade from 1991 to 2001, exposure to thimerosal containing hepatitis B vaccines in the first 6 months of life resulted in an estimated 0.5 to 1 million U.S. children being diagnosed with learning disabilities. That's 1 million who got the vaccine and then were later diagnosed with these issues. Now, here's the problem. When you are born, your brain is still not fully developed. And the nerves are basically just floating in the brain, and they're not yet protected by what is called the myelin sheaths, which keep the neurons separated, prevent short circuits, and also prevent anything that can get past the blood-brain barrier from getting into the neurons and causing problems. So it is before these myelin sheaths are in place is when the mind of a child is most vulnerable to a chemical insult. That's when they can really be damaged. Okay, now, getting on back to Europe, this article just came on in. Apparently, up in Sweden, the migrant situation is on the verge of being a civil war. There are armed migrant teens roaming the neighborhoods with Kalashnikovs. And the government is now talking a civil conflict. They're going to call out the military. And that same thing is going to happen here in this country if we don't get our borders under control. That Sweden was, you know, the bastion of liberalism. Female government, liberal, everything, bike paths. I remember when Grand Tour did a segment in Sweden, and Jeremy Clarkson couldn't help but poke fun at them. But this is what happens. Liberals will make decisions based on what sounds good and, oh, wouldn't it be nice if. They're not very good at actually thinking long-term and considering the possibility that what they're doing might have a different outcome than what they're expecting. And that's what's happened here. Sweden opened up its borders. The refugees are pouring on in, became the rape capital of the world. Now they've got the no-go zones. And now the no-go zones are being protected from the police by migrant teens armed with Kalashnikovs. Way to go, Sweden. You've shown the world how well this open border policy works. And still, the globalists, George Soros and the liberals, they think it's a great idea. Just because it didn't work for Sweden, or just because it didn't work out for Italy, or just because it didn't work out for all those people, doesn't mean it can't work here. We're going to do exactly the same thing they did that led to disaster, but we believe it'll work out wonderfully here. That all these migrants and MS-13 gang members and contagious people are going to come on in, and we're going to just stand around and hug and hug and hug each other in the spirit of global humankind. Now, over in the Philippines, Mount Mayon is erupting. They've got it at what they call alert level 4, which is one below the highest level, but it's spewing a lot of lava, pyroclastic flows, a lot of material into the air. Plane routes are being changed, and basically the Philippines is expecting this eruption is probably going to last about 3 months long. So they've already evacuated the areas where the lava and the pyroclastic flows are expected to land. And those people, I guess, are camped out somewhere. But again, they may have lost their homes. It's one of the things that when you live on the side of a volcano, it's a reality. Now, obviously, on Oahu, our volcano is extinct. The hotspot has moved, well, actually, to be correct, our tectonic plate has moved off toward the northwest, and the hotspot is now under the southern edge of the Big Island. And it's already starting to form a new island off the coast of the Big Island. It's called Loihi. It was at one point starting to get close to the surface, and then something happened, and there was a landslide, and the top part broke off and fell down. And all those real estate agents standing on the south shore of the Big Island with their for sale signs just went, oh, gosh, darn it. And they were all set to go here. Actually, if you look at a map of Hawaii that includes the ocean floor, you will see that many times in Hawaii's past, big chunks of rock have just split off the island and crashed out to the ocean floor. It does happen every once in a while. And there are a lot of people concerned about the lava buildup in what's called the Southern Rift Zone on the Big Island, that we could see that slide into the ocean, and that would be a huge mega tsunami. But getting on back to the Philippines, their disaster agency is basically saying they're gearing up for 3 months of emergency while this volcano does its thing. And hopefully it won't erupt all that badly. Now, up in Oklahoma, as you know, there's been a lot of people who are very concerned about the so-called smart meters. These are meters that are being put on your home's electric system instead of the old spinning disc one that had to be read by somebody that would come into the building and read it. They have these smart meters where somebody from the power company just drives along the street and sends out a radio ping with your ID on it, and the smart meter broadcasts back to you. And because of the distance from the house to the street, it's a fairly powerful transmitter, sort of on the low end of cell phone signal level. But a lot of people have been very concerned about whether these smart meters are safe, whether the radio signal is safe. There apparently have been a lot of issues with these smart meters spontaneously bursting into flame, and even more concerned about the fact that these smart meters appear able to connect to the Internet of Things devices in your home to tell what you actually have turned on and turned off. So apparently Oklahoma is introducing a bill that would basically result in all smart meters to be removed. And it's a consumer protection bill, and I rather doubt it will get passed, but at least there's this one legislator that is saying, yeah, my constituents are concerned, we're going to do something about it. Now, down in Cape Town in South Africa, they are in serious hurt. They're expecting to run out of water by the middle of April. And they've had drought for 3 years now. And, of course, they're blaming it all on human-caused global warming. But there's a host of factors there, including poor government planning. The dams and reservoirs are all running dangerously low, and it was allowed to get into a crisis situation. Now, there is already water usage restrictions on the people, but starting on April 12th, the entire city is literally going to be dependent on water that's being imported. And already there are water companies down there that are going to make a fast buck off of these people suffering. Okay. Over in Michigan, they're dealing with yet another water crisis. Our entire country has a water crisis, with rare exception. Now, you know, Michigan first came into the news because in Flint, Michigan, it was discovered the tap water had dangerously high levels of lead contamination, which can cause neurological damage, can actually, in high enough concentrations, make you sick, cause you to die. And there was a big stink about that. But apparently now Michigan residents are looking at a new water crisis because the state is scrambling to combat health risks in water sources that stem from chemicals long used in firefighting, waterproofing, carpeting, and other products. In other words, now that they're basically taking the water out of rivers and streams, anything that pours into those rivers and streams is now getting into the tap water. And apparently, in December of last year, toxic chemicals were identified at 28 sites in 14 communities across Michigan. Nearly half are on or near military installations where the source of contamination is believed to be from firefighting foam. Now, the main affected area is near Van Etten Lake. Other areas near WAFB are also being investigated. So these firefighting foams use per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and they're used on military bases, and apparently they've been found at an old industrial dump site for footwear company Wolverine Worldwide. So the state is now looking at approximately $23 million in emergency spending. Meanwhile, just 128 miles away from Flint, Michigan, Nestle pays the state of Michigan just $200 a year to extract millions of gallons of safe, clean water. Now, you just think about that one for a while. This is an epic example of life under fascism. You know, wastewater. That's what to call it. What's coming out of our tap is wastewater. And it's good for the Nestle business model because more and more people aren't drinking the tap water. They're buying it in the bottles. And that was Nestle's business model. The CEO of Nestle is on record as saying, people should not have a natural right to water. It should be commoditized like anything else and made money on. Now, I hold a somewhat different view. In the Declaration of Independence, it says we have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whatever that last one is supposed to mean. It was originally going to be property, but the bankers took that one out. But if we have a right to life, then we have an automatic implicit right to the necessities of life: food, shelter, water. And we live in a country where water is being pumped out of the ground underneath people, put in plastic bottles and sold to them, in a country where it's now becoming more and more illegal to gather water on your own property, to collect rainwater. It's the king's raindrops, you knave. That water belongs to corporations. The water belongs to the government. You own nothing. In fact, we own you, as George Carlin would say. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. Apparently out in California, Ian Calderon, who's the Democratic Majority Leader in California's lower house, is introducing a bill to prevent sit-down restaurants from giving customers straws with their beverages unless they specifically request one. And under Calderon's proposed law, a waiter who serves a drink with an unrequested straw in it would face up to 6 months in jail and a fine of up to $1,000. Now, this is way over the top, and it's very intrusive. Now, Calderon's issue here is that plastic straws are one-time use, and it has detrimental effects on the landfills, waterways, and oceans. Well, there are two solutions. First of all, and if you go to a Starbucks, you've probably already seen this, they're now making reusable stainless steel straws, which means you got to carry it with you, and it's one more piece of thing to take around. The other solution is go back to using paper straws that biodegrade. But don't go on out there and just add one more thing for these service people in the restaurants to have to keep in mind. I mean, it strikes me as ridiculous. Doesn't the California legislature have anything more important to worry about, like all the illegal immigrants that are crashing the state's budget? That really is a little out there. Okay, now, Illinois is looking at a new law that will ban children under 12 years old from playing tackle football. And I think that actually would be a good idea because kids can get hurt in some of these sports. And football, tackle football, is very, very rough. I've seen reports of kids who've been killed just playing softball. That ball hits them at the right spot on the chest. So, yeah, we got to be very careful about youth sports. Of course, the way the NFL is going right now, I think American rules football may soon vanish and we'll become a soccer nation like the rest of the world. And in soccer, you don't tackle each other. It's a much safer sport here. Apparently, over in Pittsburgh, they had another oil drilling rig explode. And apparently the company that was running it, Patterson-UTI Energy, has a long history of past OSHA violations in the state. Apparently, the reason the fire got out of control was they had a manual blowout preventer, and the remote control switch that was supposed to operate it failed to work. Shades of Gulf oil disaster. Finally, apparently OSHA has cited the Koch Foods in Gainesville alleging safety health violations. And apparently the Koch brothers own this food poultry processing operation in Gainesville. The machinery is not adequately shielded to guard against accidental amputation. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and look after the lovely lady Claire. Like I said, it looks like the problem with the website has been fixed, but it may take a few hours for the fix to get to you. So stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of stuff to share with you. Please keep this issue of the FISA memo and the FBI text in front of everybody that you know. Share it with everyone. Have a really good weekend. Have a safe weekend. Aloha, America.